The silk pillow beneath her cheek was damp with treacherous. Her body ached with a bone-deep weariness that no amount of rest could cure. Ella Ra's fingers curled into the fine linen sheets, and she felt the familiar sting of broken skin beneath her nails where she had clawed at the walls of her prison. The side road. That was what they called it. A euphemism for the gilded cage where she had been cast aside. She opened her eyes, and the morning light stabbed through the narrow window like a blade. Dust motes danced in the golden beam, indifferent to her suffering. The room was small, large enough for the narrow bed and the rickety writing desk that had become her only companion. The walls were covered in faded silk that once might have been beautiful, but now hung in limp, yellowed folds. This was her world now. This was all they had left her. The door creaked open, and Ella Ra did not need to turn her head to know who entered. The scent of rose water preceded her, cloying and sweet, the same perfume that had once been a comfort in her childhood. Now it made her stomach churn with bile. Still Abed, sister, Lillian's voice was honey-laced with arsenic. Her footsteps were light, graceful, the steps of a woman who had never known a moment of genuine hardship. How very lazy of you. I suppose it is to be expected, given your circumstances. Ella Ra forced herself to sit up, her joints protesting. She had not eaten properly in days. The servants, under Lillian's quiet instruction, had grown forgetful of her meals. The water in her pitcher was always lukewarm and stale. The coal for her brazier was always the last to be delivered, often not at all. Lillian, she said, her voice rasping from disuse. What do you want? Her sister smiled, that perfect, practiced smile that had charmed the entire court. Lillian was beautiful in the way that spring flowers were beautiful, bright, ephemeral, and utterly without substance. Her golden hair was arranged in elaborate coils, threaded with pearls that had once belonged to their mother. The pearls Ella Ra had been promised on her wedding day. You have been summoned, Lillian announced, smoothing the front of her dove-gray gown. Father wishes to speak with you. And Rian, of course. He has been so patient with you, Ella Ra. You should be grateful. A lesser man would have set you aside the moment you failed to produce an heir. The words cut deep, as they were meant to. Ella Ra remembered the early days of her marriage, when she had been so hopeful, so desperately in love with the handsome Lord Rian. He had courted her with poetry and promises, had sworn that she was the sun in his sky. The night she miscellaneously ride their first child, she had wept in his arms, and he had held her, whispering that they would try again. But the second child never came either. Each loss chipped away at something inside her, and each time, Rian grew more distant, more critical, until his love had curdled into something cold and calculating. She had not realized then that he had never loved her at all. He had loved her fortune, her name, her connection to her father's powerful dukedom. Once he had secured it, once he had drained her accounts into his own ventures, she was nothing but an inconvenient obligation. Ella Ra rose from the bed, her legs unsteady. She was wearing a simple nightgown, threadbare at the edges. Lillian's eyes swept over her with undisguised contempt. You cannot are before father like that, Lillian said, her lip curling. Have you no shame? No dignity? I have no maid, Ella Ra replied flatly. You saw to that, did you not? Lillian's smile faltered for just a moment. I have no idea what you mean. Servants come and go. They are fickle creatures. Now I have brought you something to wear. It is old, of course, but it will serve. She produced a gown from behind her back, a faded purple thing that had been out of fashion for years. The hem was frayed, and there was a stain the bodice that looked like wine. Ella Ra recognized it. It was one of Lillian's cast-offs, a dress she had worn to a minor estate gathering 3 years ago. The fact that she had kept it, had brought it here as an act of cruelty disguised as generosity, was almost amusing in its pettiness. Ella Ra took the gown without a word. She knew better than to argue. Every protest, every sign of defiance, would be reported back to Rian and her father. They would interpret it as madness, as proof that she was unstable, unworthy of her position. That was the narrative they were weaving, thread by thread, and she was powerless to stop it. She dressed in silence, ignoring Lillian's watchful gaze. The gown was too tight across her chest, too loose at her waist. She had lost more weight than she had realized. Her reflection in the small, tarnished mirror showed a hollow-eyed woman with sunken cheeks and a mouth that had forgotten how to smile. "As you can see, I am ready," Ella R.A. said, her voice flat. "Lead the way." The walk to her father's study was a gauntlet of whispers. Servants ducked out of her path, their eyes sliding away as if she were a ghost. They all knew that she had fallen from favor, that her husband had taken a mistress in plain sight. The mistress was Lillian, the sister who had always been jealous, always hungry for what Ella R.A. had. Now she had it all, the title, the wealth, the husband, and Ella R.A. had nothing. Her father, the Duke of Ashworth, sat behind his massive oak desk like a king on a throne. He was a tall, stern man with iron-gray hair and eyes the color of winter frost. He had never been roi, not even when Ella R.A. was a child. She had always tried to earn his approval, had studied harder than Lillian, had been more obedient, more dutiful. It had never been enough. Lillian was the favorite, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. "Daughter," her father said, not rising from his seat. "You look ill. Have you been tending to your health properly?" "Rian has seen to my every need, father," Ella R.A. replied, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "I am merely tired." Her father nodded, accepting the falsehood without question. "Good. Then you will have no trouble understanding what I am about to say." He paused, shuffling papers on his desk. Ella R.A.'s heart began to beat faster, a familiar dread coiling in her stomach. She had been summoned here for a reason. There was always a reason, and it was never good. "The king has grown dissatisfied with Rian's performance on the Frontier Council," her father began. "His recommendations have been unpopular. There are rumors of mismanagement, of funds that cannot be accounted for." Ella R.A. felt her skin prickle. She knew those funds. They had been hers. Rian had taken her inheritance, her dowry, everything her mother had left her, and poured it into ventures that had failed spectacularly. But the rumors of theft were aimed at him, not her. "Father, I do not understand how this concerns me," she said ruefully. "I have no role in the council's affairs." "No, you do not," her father agreed. "But you are his wife. And a wife shares in her husband's burdens. I have made arrangements with the king's advisors. In exchange for Rian's removal from the council, the crown will accept a significant contribution to the royal treasury. From your remaining assets, of course. The ones you inherited from your mother." The room tilted. Ella R.A. gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "What remaining assets? There is nothing left. Rian took everything. He told me he was investing it in trade ventures, but there has been no return, no accounting. Rian has explained all of this to me." Her father cut her off, his voice flat and cold. "You are either foolish or dishonest, Ella R.A. You spent lavishly. You gave gifts to your maids, to the church, to every beggar who crossed your path. The money is gone because of your own profligacy. Rian has been forced to cover your debts." "That is a lie." The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. "I never." "You will lower your voice in my presence," her father thundered, slamming his palm on the desk. "You are a disgrace. A failure as a wife, as a daughter, as a woman of this house. The assets will be transferred. You will sign the documents." Lillian, who had been standing silently by the window, let out a soft, pitying sigh. "Poor Ella R.A. Father only wants what is best for you. If you would simply cooperate, there would be no need for all this unpleasantness." Ella R.A. looked at her sister, at the smug satisfaction rely hidden behind her mask of concern. She wanted to scream, to claw at that perfect face, to tear the pearls from her throat and shatter them on the floor. But she did not move. She could not. Her father pushed a parchment across the desk. It was dense with legal language, a labyrinth of clauses and subclauses that she could not possibly RSE in her current state. But she understood the essence of it. She was signing away the last shred of her independence, the last thing that made her valuable to anyone. Once she signed, she would be nothing. Less than nothing. Sign it, her father commanded. Her hand trembled as she took the quill. The ink was black, the color of mourning. She dipped the nib, and as she did, she caught a glimpse of movement in the doorway. Rian stood there, tall and handsome in his royal blue tunic, his dark hair perfectly coiffed. His eyes were on her, but they held no RMTH. Only calculation. "Do not keep your father waiting, my love," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I have a new venture to discuss with him. It will require your SIVO operation." The pieces clicked into place. The assets. The arrangement with the king. The new venture. They were stripping her BA piece by piece, and she was powerless to stop them. The quill hovered over the parchment, and for a moment, Ella considered refusing. Let them see her defiance. Let them kill her if they wished. At least death would be an end to this misery. But something held her back. A small, stubborn spark of survival that had not yet been extinguished. She signed her name, the letters shaky but legible. Ella Voss, Duchess of Thornwood. A title that meant nothing now. "Good," her father said, snatching the parchment from her. "You may go." She turned to leave, but Rian caught her arm, his grip bruising. "Not yet," he murmured, leaning close to her. "There is something else you should know. The king has been most generous. He has agreed to grant me an annulment, on the grounds of your instability, and I am to Rry Lillian. The ceremony will be held in a fortnight." The world went silent. The words did not make sense. They were nonsense, gibberish. But they were also devastatingly clear. He was writing her. Publicly, officially. She would be cast aside like a worn-out shoe, her reputation in tatters, her family support gone, her very existence erased. "Annulment," she whispered. "But we have been married for 5 years. There are precedence laws. Laws can be bent," Rian said with a cold, dismissive smile. "Especially when there is sufficient motivation. The king owes my family a debt, and he is happy to repay it. Your father has agreed to the arrangement. It is done." She looked to her father, searching for some glimmer of paternal protection, some last-minute rescue. But the Duke of Ashworth was already shuffling his papers, his attention elsewhere. He had sold her. Just as Rian had sold her. Just as Lillian had sold her. "I hope you will be happy," Ella heard herself say, the words hollow and meaningless. "Oh, I will be," Lillian replied, stepping forward to take Rian's arm. "We both will be. Perhaps you could attend the wedding. Sister, it would be good for you to see me properly married to the man who is always meant to be mine." The cruelty of it, the naked, shameless cruelty, was almost too much to bear. Ella felt her legs give way, and she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of her father's desk. The papers scattered.
"Dahil Augid."
"Take her away," he ordered the guardias who had materialized at the door. "She is clear RLY overwrought. See that she is confined to her chambers. She is not to leave until the annulment is finalized." They dragged her from the room, her feet rely touching the floor. She did not struggle. She had no strength left. The corridors of her childhood home, the place where she had been born and raised, now felt like the walls of a tomb. Servants averted their eyes. No one came to her aid. They threw her back into the side yard and locked the door. She lay on the cold floor, staring up at the water-stained ceiling, and wept. She wept for her mother, who had died too young. She wept for the children she had lost, the little ghosts that haunted her sleepless nights. She wept for the girl she had been, the girl who had believed in love and honor and family. And when the TRS dried, something else took their place. A cold, hardy fury that settled into her bones like ice. She would not die here. She would not let them win. But what could she do? She was trapped, friendless, stripped of every resource. The guardias outside her door were Rian's men. The servants via read Lillian's spite. Her father had already washed his hands of her. The days blurred together. Meals came, sometimes, but she could not eat. She drank the stale water because she had no choice. She lay on her narrow bed and listened to the sounds of the household, the servants laughing in the kitchens, the distant music from Lillian's chambers, the thud of the guardias' footsteps as they made their rounds. Life went on around her, indifferent to her suffering. On the night of the 12th day, the lock clicked open, and Rian entered her room. He was dressed in his finest, the jewels of his title gleaming at his throat. His eyes were bright with triumph. "You are still alive," he observed, sounding almost disappointed. "I had hoped the stress would have done the work for us. But no matter. We have a final piece of business to attend to." "I have nothing left to give you," she said, her voice a dry whisper. "You have taken everything." Rian smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had won. "Not everything. The king is still concerned about the matter of your mother's landholdings. They are entailed to the Ashworth name, of course, but he wishes to see a tidy resolution. You are the last obstacle. Once you are officially declared deceased, the properties will revert to the duchy, and Lillian and I will inherit them through my new connection to your father." "Deceased," she repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. "You mean to murder me?" "Do not be so dramatic," Rian said, waving a hand dismissively. "I am simply ensuring that the line of succession is clear. You will be missed, of course. There will be a lovely funeral. We shall say it was an illness, a fever brought on by your unstable humors. No one will question it. You have been so reclusive, so unwell." He stepped closer, and she saw the syringe in his hand. It was filled with a thick, dark liquid that glinted in the candlelight. "Nightshade extract," he explained, as if she had asked. "It will appear to be a seizure. The apothecary has been paid. His testimony will be impeccable. Do not struggle. It will only make it worse." Lara scrambled backway on the bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had known, somewhere in the depths of her soul, that this was how it would end. But to face it, to see the instrument of her death in his hands, was a horror beyond anything she had imagined. "Rian, please," she begged, hating herself for the weakness. "I will go anywhere. I will live in exile. I will never speak of you, never trouble you again. Just let me live." He paused, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Pity, perhaps. Remorse. But then he laughed, and the sound was as cold as the grave. "Let you live, you, who have been nothing but a burden, you, who could not even give me an heir, you are useless. Lara. You have always been useless. The only value you had was in your name and your fortune. And I have those now." He drew closer, the syringe gleaming. "Be still. This will be over soon." She fought him. She scratched at his face, kicked at his legs, screamed until her throat was raw. But he was stronger, and the guardias were outside, and no one came to help her. The needle pierced her skin, and the pain was immediate, searing. The room began to tilt, the walls bleeding into shadows. Rian's face swam before her, beautiful and monstrous. "You will burn in hell for this," she gasped, her tongue thick and unsuperative. He smiled. "Perhaps. But you will be there first. Would you buy, Elaha? I hope your suffering was worth it." The darkness closed in, thick and suffocating. She felt her body convulse, felt the blood vessels in her eyes burst with the strain. Her last conscious thought was not of vengeance. It was of her mother's face, the way she had looked when Lara was a child, sad and distant but kind. "Always be wary of the sweetest rose," her mother had whispered. "Its thorns often the deadliest." She had learned that lesson too late, and then the world exploded into light. Lara gasped, her eyes flying open. Her heart was a wild thing in her chest, beating against her ribs like a caged bird. She was lying on her back, and the ceiling above her was achingly familiar. It was the ceiling of her childhood bedroom, The one she had read with her sister before Lillian had begun to poison her life. The Saidia RD was gone. The Na-Ro bed, the water-stained ceiling, the locked door. All of it was gone. She sat up slowly, her hands trembling. The sun was streaming through the window, golden and wa-rm, and the scent of fresh roses drifted on the breeze. She looked down at her hands. They were smooth, unblemished, the hands of a girl of 17. Not the ravaged, desperate hands of a woman who had been slowly ravaged and murdered by her own family. A knock at the door made her flinch. A maid entered, a young girl with a round face and worried eyes. "My lady, you called for me," the girl paused, her brow furrowing. "You look as though you've seen a ghost." "You well." Lara read at the maid. Her name was Clara. She remembered Clara, a kind girl who had brought her meals in secret during the final months. She remembered watching Clara being dismissed, her face pale and frightened as Lillian Stewart escorted her from the house. But this was not the final months. This was something else. She turned to the mirror on her dressing table, and the face that read back at her as young, hopeful, unbroken. Her hand flew to her throat. There was no trace of the poison. There was no memory of searing pain. There was only a dream, a nightmare so vivid that it had to be real. Or was it the calendar on her desk caught her eye? It was the first day of spring, the day before the first grand feast of the season. The feast where she would be publicly humiliated. The feast where Da Rian would first begin to turn the court against her. The feast where, in another life, she had smiled and smiled and smiled as they slowly drove the dagger into her heart. Her lips curved into a smile. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had seen the end of her story and had been given the chance to rewrite it. "Clara," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I need you to fetch my seamstress. The one who works for Lady Miriam, not the one my father uses. Do you understand?" The maid nodded, confused but obedient. "Yes, my lady." "And Clara," Ella added, her gaze sharpening. "Tell no one of this. Not even the other maids. If anyone asks, you are rerunning an errand for my sister." The girl's eyes widened, but she nodded again and scurried out of the room. Lara rose from the bed and walked to the window. The gardens below were in full bloom, the roses a riot of crimson and gold. They had been beautiful once. They had smelled sweet and innocent. Now she knew the truth. Beneath the petals were thorns, and beneath the thorns was death. But she was not dead. She was alive. And she had a second chance. The nightmare had been real. She knew it in her bones, in the marrow of her soul. She had died at the hands of the people she trusted most. Da Rian had murdered her. Lillian had smiled as she took her place. Her father had signed the documents that made it all possible, and now she was here, 17 years old, on the cusp of everything. The feast was tomorrow. The poison was being prepared. The whispers were being stitched. But this time, she would not be the victim. This time, she would be the one to wield the blade. The first step was simple. She needed allies. Not the ones who had failed her before, but the ones who had been overlooked. The servants who owed no allegiance to Da Rian. The minor nobles who had been slighted by her father. The king's own advisors, who had secretly been building a case against Da Rian's mismanagement. She knew things now. Details she had dismissed in her first life. Da Rian's mistress in the capital. The debts he had never mentioned. The letters he had hidden in his study. The forged signatures. The embezzled funds. The lies that formed the foundation of his brilliant career. She would use them all. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Clara was back, slightly out of breath. "My lady, the seamstress is here. And a letter came for you. It was left at the servants' entrance, with your name on it." Lara took the letter, her fingers brushing against the fine parchment. The seal was unbroken, a simple wax crest with a single sigil. A dagger piercing a rose. She did not recognize it, but as she broke the seal and read the words inside, a slow smile spread across her face. "To the lady who will rise from the ashes," the letter began. "I have watched you, and I have seen the truth of your suffering. The flames that seek to consume you will instead forge you anew. I offer you my aid, unnamed and unseen for now. Come to the eastern gate of the palace at midnight. Come alone, and bring your hunger for justice." She folded the letter CA ruefully, slipping it into her sleeve. The parchment burned against her skin, a promise of vengeance. CLARA was watching her with wide, curious eyes. "My lady, what does it say?" Lara turned to the window, her reflection in the glass a ghostly echo of the woman she had been. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire. Tomorrow, the feast would begin. Tomorrow they would try to destroy her. But tonight, she would make her move. "It says," Lara replied, her voice soft and sharp as a blade, "that the game has only just begun." And in the distance, the palace bells began to toll, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. The hunt was on, and Lara Voss, the Duchess of Thornwood, was no longer prey. She was the predator, and she would feast on the blood of her enemies. The eastern gate of the palace loomed before Lara, its iron bars twisted into ornate patterns of vines and thorns that seemed to writhe in the flickering torchlight. She had slipped through the servants' corridors with the ease of a ghost, her footsteps muffled by the soft leather of her riding boots. CLARA had helped her preparee, had asked no questions, and for that, Lara was grateful. Loyalty born of kindness was a recurrency, and she intended to spend it wisely. The night air was COL against her skin, CA rang the scent of wet EARTH and night-blooming jasmine. She had worn a simple cloak of deep forest green, the hood pulled four-way RD to shadow her features. If she were seen, she would be just another servant on an errand. If she were discovered, she would claim she was seeking a moment of solitude, a desperate attempt to calm her nerves before the feast. But she was not nervous. She was alive with purpose, every sense heightened, every nerve singing with anticipation. The letter in her sleeve seemed to pulse with its own heat, a beacon drawing her four-way road. A figure emerged from the shadows of the GA Ruden wall. Tall and broad-shouldered, the silhouette was unmistakably male, wrapped in a dark traveling cloak that blended seamlessly with the night. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to command, and when he stepped into the pool of torchlight, Lara felt her breath catch. She knew that face. She had seen it in the court, had he heard the whispers that followed him. Prince Aldrich, the king's youngest brother, a man of 30 years who had spent the last decade on the frontier, taming the rebellious northern lords and securing the border against raiders. He was a legend in his own time, a warrior prince who had refused the comfort of the capital for the glory of the battlefield. He was also, according to court gossip, a man who despised the scheming nobility that infested the king's inner circle. "Lady Lara," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "You came. I confess, I was not certain you would." "How could I refuse such a compelling invitation?" she replied, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. She had not expected this. She had expected a minor lord, perhaps a disgruntled courtier, someone who could offer her whispered secrets and back-alley alliances. She had not expected a prince. Aldrich studied her with eyes the color of storm clouds, sharp and assessing. He was not conventionally handsome, not in the polished, pampered way of her father's court. His face was all hard angles and sharp lines, weathered by wind and sun, with a SCA-R that ran from his left brow to his cheekbone, a pale line that spoke of close combat. He was beautiful in a way that made her think of swords and blood and survival. "You know who I am," he said, stating the obvious. "And you know what I represent. I am not a man of the court, Lady Lara. I am a man of the battlefield. I speak plainly, and I expect the same in return." "I would have it no other way, Your Highness," she replied. "I have had my fill of sweet lies and poisoned honey." His lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. "Then we understand each other. I have been watching you, Lara. Not in the way of a suitor, but in the way of a general assessing a battlefield. You are a woman surrounded by enemies, betrayed by those who should protect you, stripped of your power and your dignity. And yet you stand here, in the dead of night, facing a prince you rely no. That takes courage. Or foolishness. Perhaps a measure of both, Ella admitted. But I have read that courage and foolishness are often the same coin, viewed from different angles. Aldrich laughed, a low, genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. I like you, Lady Ella. You are not what I expected. I have the whispers, of course. The pathetic little duchess, the Wren wife, the madwoman locked in her own home. But I do not believe in whispers. I believe in what I see. And what I see is a woman repeating a blade, waiting for the right moment to strike. He stepped closer, and she could smell the leather of his coat, the faint tang of steel and horse. He was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, the faint lines at their corners that hinted at laughter and hardship in equal measure. I know what they plan for you tomorrow, he said, his voice dropping to a murmur. The poison, the accusation, the annulment. My brother's court is a viper's nest, and I have made it my business to know every snake slithering through it. Ella blood ran cold. He knew everything. The question was, how and why had he chosen to involve himself? Forgive my bluntness, Your Highness, she said ruefully. But why would you, of all people, about the fate of a minor duchess? What do you gain from this alliance? Aldrich's eyes hardened, and for a moment, she saw the warrior beneath the mask. I gain a weapon, he said flatly. Your husband, Lord Rien, is a traitor. He has been funneling coin to the northern rebels, selling information to our enemies, and building a faction of his own within the court. My brother is too blind to see it, too tangled in the webs of his own sycophants to recognize the blade at his throat. I need proof, Ella. I need something that will bring Rien down. And you, I suspect, have access to that proof. The pieces clicked into place. Rien's secret meetings. The letters he burned in the study. The midnight visitors who came and went with hooded faces. It had all been part of a law-ridger conspiracy, one that reached far beyond her personal tragedy. He had not just betrayed her. He had betrayed the crown itself. I can get you what you need, she said, her voice steady. I know where he keeps his correspondence. I know the names of his contacts. I know everything he has done to me, and I suspect that is only the smallest portion of his crimes. Aldrich's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Then we have an accord. I will protect you, Lady Ella. I will ensure that your name is read, that your enemies fall, that you are restored to your rightful position. In return, you will help me destroy Rien and his network. Lara extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Aldrich took it. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip firm and warm. It was the handshake of equals, not of a prince and a subject. She felt a thrill of something she had not felt in years. Hope. There is something else, Aldrich said, releasing her hand. My sources tell me that your sister, Lady Lillian, has been spreading rumors of your instability. She has told the court that you suffer from fits of madness, that you are a danger to yourself and others. It is a calculated campaign, designed to make your eventual death seem inevitable, almost merciful. She has always been skilled at playing the artwire. I should have seen it sooner. I should have recognized her envy for what it was. Envy is a powerful motivator, Aldrich agreed. But envy alone does not drive a woman to murder her own sister. There is something deeper at play. I believe your father is involved in the conspiracy as well, though I have not yet discovered the full extent of his role. The mention of her father sent a fresh wave of cold fury through her. He had sold her, signed away her inheritance, and watched as she was slowly destroyed. He was as guilty as Rien and Lillian, if not more so. A father's betrayal was a wound that would never fully heal. Then we will bring him down too, Ella said, her voice cold and harrowed. I will not rest until every single person who contributed to my suffering is destroyed. Is that acceptable to you, Your Highness? Aldrich studied her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. Acceptable, it is more than acceptable, It is the best thing I have HRD in yo RS. You have the HRT of a warrior, Lady Ella, R.A. I would not want to be your enemy. The bells of the palace began to chime, marking the hour. Midnight had come and gone, and she still had preparations to make for the feast. She needed to return before anyone noticed her absence. I must go, she said, already stepping back Tawa RD the gate. The feast is tomorrow, and I have much to do. How will I contact you? Aldrich reached into his cloak and produced a small silver whistle, intricately revealed with the image of a hawk in flight. If you need me, blow this. I have stationed a man in the kitchens, a trusted servant who will find me wherever I am. He goes by the name Thomas. If you need information, if you are in danger, send word through him. Lara took the whistle, her fingers closing around the cold metal. It felt like a talisman, a promise of safety in a world that had offered her nothing but pain. Thank you, she said, the words simple, but here it felt. Aldrich's expression softened, just slightly. Do not thank me yet, Lady Lara. The real battle begins tomorrow. I will be watching from the shadows. I will not let them hurt you again. He vanished into the darkness as silently as he had come, leaving her alone in the den with the whisper of the wind and the distant hum of the night. She stood there for a long moment, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. She had an ally, a powerful, dangerous ally who was willing to help her destroy her enemies. But even as she felt the first glimmer of hope, a shadow of doubt crept into her mind. Aldrich was playing his own game, pursuing his own agenda. He wanted Rian brought down for treason, and he was using her to do it. She was a tool, a weapon, a convenient piece on his chessboard road. If she became inconvenient, would he RD her as easily as Rian had? She could not afford to trust him completely. She could not afford to trust anyone completely. The lesson of her first life was read into her soul. Trust was weakness, and weakness was death. She tucked the whistle into her sleeve and made her way back through the servants' corridors, her footsteps silent on the worn stone. The palace was sleeping, but her mind was racing. She had a plan now, a framework for vengeance, but the details were still taking shape. The first step was the feast. She needed to survive it, to emerge stronger than before. She needed to let Rian and Lillian think they were winning, to play the role of the broken, pathetic wife they expected her to be. And then, when they least expected it, she would strike. By the time she reached her chambers, Clara was waiting for her, her eyes wide with anxiety. My lady, you were gone so long. I was so worried. All is well, Ella assured her, shedding her cloak. I have simply been gathering information. Tomorrow, I will need your help. There is something I must ask of you, and it requires great secrecy. Clara nodded, her face pale but determined. Anything, my lady. I would do anything for you. Lara placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. I know you would, and I will not forget your loyalty. When this is over, you will be ride beyond your wildest dreams. But for now, I need you to listen fully. She explained her plan in hushed tones, each detail fully calibrated. Clara would approach Thomas in the kitchens, the man Aldrich had mentioned, and deliver a message. She would also begin spreading a different rumor among the servants, one that would sow discord in Lillian's fully constructed narrative. Tell the kitchen maids that you RD Lady Lillian arguing with Lord Rian last night, Lara instructed. Tell them that she threatened to expose his secrets if he did not give her a law rigor shari of the inheritance. Make it sound like a heated lover's quarrel, something passionate and dangerous. It will reach the court by morning, I guarantee it. Clara's eyes widened. But my lady, if it reaches the wrong EARS, then it will reach the right EARS as well, Lara said firmly. I need the court to begin questioning Lillian's devotion, to see the cracks in her perfect facade. Let them wonder if she is truly the innocent she pretends to be. It was a small thing, a whisper in the dark, but in the breeding ground of the court, whispers grew into rumors, and rumors grew into accusations. By the time the feast began, Lillian would be on the defensive, And that was exactly where Ella R.A. wanted her. After CLA R.A. Deparute, Ella R.A. sat alone in her chamber, SDA ring at her reflection in the mirror. The face that looked back at her was still that of a 17-year-old girl, but the eyes were ancient, filled with the knowledge of a lifetime of suffering. She had died, had felt the poison burn through her veins, had heard the cold laughter of her enemies as she breathed her last. And now she was back, reborn from the ashes of her own destruction. Tomorrow, she would walk into the lion's den. Tomorrow, she would face her tormentors with a smile on her face and a knife hidden in her sleeve. But she would not be the prey. Not this time. She reached for the letter opener on her desk, the one with the crystal hilt that her mother had given her. It was not a weapon of warriors, but it was sharp enough to draw blood. She held it up to the candlelight, watching the flame dance in the crystal's depths. They think they have won, she murmured to her reflection. They think I am broken, helpless, defeated. But they are wrong. I am not broken. I am forged. I am not helpless. I am Med. And I am not defeated. I am just beginning. She slipped the letter opener into the hidden pocket of her gown, the same one she had used in her first life to defend herself. It had failed her then. It would not fail her now. The first light of dawn was beginning to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pale gold and soft pink. The feast was only hours away. The game was about to begin. And Ella R.A. Voss, the Duchess of Thornwood, was ready to play. The great hall of the palace blazed with the light of 1,000 candles, their flames reflected in the gilded mirrors that lined the walls like silent witnesses. The long tables were draped in cloth of silver, laden with dishes that steamed with aromatic richness, roasted swans with their feathers reattached, glazed hams studded with cloves, delicate pastries shaped like flowers and castles. The nobility of the realm had gathered in their finest silks and velvets, their jewels glittering like captive stars against the opulent backdrop. Ella R.A. stood at the entrance to the hall, her hand resting lightly on CLA Rose RM, and allowed herself a moment to absorb the scene. She had attended 100 feasts like this in her first life, had smiled and curtsied and played the party of the devoted wife, while the vulture circled. But this time, she saw it all with new eyes. The sycophantic smiles. The whispered conspiracies. The knives hidden beneath the silk. She wore the sapphire gown as planned. It was a deep, midnight blue that made her skin seem luminous, her dark hair a cascade of shadow against the rich fabric. She had refused Lillian's ruby necklace, had chosen instead a simple strand of pearls that had belonged to her mother. The pearls were col against her throat, a reminder of the woman who had warned her so long ago. Lady Ella R.A., Duchess of Thornwood, the herald announced, his voice echoing through the hall. The conversations faltered. Heads turned. Ella R.A. felt the weight of 100 gazes, curious and judgmental, assessing her as if she were a curiosity, a creature to be pitied or ridiculed. She lifted her chin and allowed a serene smile to settle on her lips. Let them stare. Let them whisper. She had nothing to be ashamed of. She made her way to the high table, where her father sat in his place of honor, his expression cold and distant. Beside him was Lillian, radiant in a gown of rose-gold silk that matched the color of her hair. Lillian's smile was bright and welcoming, but Ella R.A. could see the calculation behind it, the sharp assessment of her appearance, the flicker of irritation that she did not look as broken as they had hoped. Rest, sister, Lillian said, rising to embrace her. You look lovely. I am so glad you decided to join us. I was worried you might be too unwell to attend. The embrace was a performance, a calculated display of sisterly affection. Ella R.A. returned it with equal theatricality, her lips brushing Lillian's cheek. I would not miss it for the world, she murmured. After all, it is not every day that we celebrate the king's favor. Lillian's smile faltered, just for a moment. She had expected a broken, cowering Ella R.A., a woman too defeated to fight. Instead, she was faced with a calm, composed adversary, and she did not know what to make of it. D.A. Rian was seated further down the table, engaged in animated conversation with a cluster of minor lords. He looked up as Ella Are approached, and his eyes widened with surprise. She saw the calculation in his gaze as well, the rapid reassessment of his position. He had left her in that Saidia RD, had watched her wither and fade, had assumed she would be a ghost by now. Instead, she was here, vibrant and whole, and he did not understand how it was possible. "Maide, our wife," he said, rising with a practiced smile. "I am so pleased you could join us." He took her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture one of courtly obligation rather than affection. His lips were cold against her skin. "The pleasure is all mine, my lord husband," Ella Are replied, her voice dulcet and sweet. "I would not dream of missing such a magnificent occasion. The king has been so generous to our family. It would be the height of ingratitude to absent myself." She saw the flicker of unease in Da Rian's eyes. She was not following the script. She was not supposed to be gracious and composed. She was supposed to be trembling and pale, a broken creature rely holding herself together. Her unexpected resilience was a variable he had not accounted for, and it made him nervous. Good. Let him be nervous. Let him wonder what she knew, what she planned. Uncertainty was a poison, and she intended to administer it in generous doses. The king entered the hall to a fanfare of trumpets, his presence commanding immediate silence. He was a man in his late 50s, his face lined with the CA residential of rule, his crown resting heavily on his brow. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who had learned that power was not in haste but in measured patience. Ella Are curtsied deeply as he passed, and she saw Aldrich at his brother's side, his gray eyes finding hers across the crowd. He gave the rest nod of acknowledgement, a signal that she was not alone. The feast began in Renest, a procession of dishes and entertainments that blurred together in a haze of music and laughter. Ella Are ate sparingly, her appetite dimmed by the knowledge of what was to come. She watched the servants moving through the hall, their faces neutral and professional, but she recognized one of them. A young man with a plain face and steady hands, who moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen more than he let on. Thomas, Aldrich's man, Kisie ride a tray of wine goblets, making his way Tawa RD the high table. Ella Raz Hirt began to beat faster. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The poisoned chalice, the accusation, the trap that had been laid for her. But this time, she was prepared. Thomas paused beside Lillian, offering her the tray. Lillian selected a goblet, her smile serene, but Ella Are noticed the slight tremor in her sister's hand. She was nervous. Good. Let her be nervous. Let her wonder if everything was going according to plan. "You look pale, sister," Lillian said, her voice rang just enough to be heard by those nearby. Feeling quite well. Perhaps you should not drink the wine. I have heard that it can have a powerful effect on those with delicate constitutions." The words were a trap, a subtle suggestion that Ella Are was unstable, unreliable. But Ella Are was ready. "On the contrary, I am feeling wonderful," she replied, her voice bright and clear. "I have been resting, you see. I find that fresh air and solitude do wonders for the spirits. I cannot imagine what I was so anxious about." She reached for a goblet on Thomas's tray, her fingers brushing against his in a gesture that was deliberate but discreet. She did not take the one he had offered Lillian. She took the one from the opposite side, the one she knew was safe. Lillian's eyes flickered with momentary confusion. She had planned for Ella Are to drink from a specific goblet, the one laced with enough poison to make her ill but not kill her, to create a scene of madness and convulsions. But Ella Are had chosen differently, and the CA refully laid trap was already unraveling. Da Rian, who had been watching the exchange with Shah RP eyes, leaned in. "Perhaps you should drink to the king's health, my day, he suggested smoothly. A toast to his long and prosperous reign." He was trying to force her hand, to make her drink from the poisoned cup. Ella Are smiled, a rm and guileless smile that did not reach her eyes. "A toast is an excellent idea," she agreed. She raised her goblet high. To His Majesty, the King. Long may he reign, and may his enemies be scattered like chaff before the wind. The hall echoed with the toast, 100 voices raised in unison. Ella Ra drank, the wine sweet and smooth on her tongue. She felt nothing but the rmth of the alcohol as it spread through her chest. Lillian's smile was frozen on her face. She had not expected this. Ella Ra was not supposed to be celebrating. She was supposed to be screaming, thrashing on the floor, her madness on display for all to see. But she was simply standing there, serene and untroubled, a glass of wine in her hand. Rian's jaw tightened. He shot a glance at Lillian, a quick exchange of frustration. They were off balance, and Ella Ra felt a surge of satisfaction that almost made her laugh. "I think I will take some air," Ella Ra announced, setting her goblet down. "The hall is so warm tonight." She slipped away from the table before anyone could stop her, her gown whispering against the marbly floor. Clara was waiting by the side entrance, her face pale with nerves. "My lady," Clara whispered, falling into step beside her. "There is news. Thomas has just come from the kitchens. The apothecary has examined the vial you sent. It contains nightshade extract, the same poison they used on you in the first life. He has written a letter to the king's chief advisor, detailing his findings." "And the accusation. Does it implicate D.A. Rian?" "The vial was found in Lord D.A. Rian's study, my lady. The apothecary has no doubt that it belongs to his household. The king's advisor has already ordered an investigation." "Perfect." The trap had not merely failed, it had snapped back on those who had set it. She had turned their own poison against them, but there was no time to celebrate. As she moved through the corridor, she heard footsteps behind her, fast and purposeful. A hand closed around her arm, and she was spun around to face her father. "What game are you playing?" the Duke of Ashworth demanded, his voice low and fierce. "You are not supposed to be here. You are supposed to be dead." Ella Ra finished for him, her voice cold. "Is that what you were hoping for, father, that I would just fade away and make everything so much simpler for you?" His eyes widened, and she saw something she had never seen in him before. He was afraid of her.
"Good.
"Let him be afraid. Your mother's lands," he said, his voice dropping to a rsh whisper. "You have signed the documents. You have no legal claim to them. If you are dead or alive, it makes no difference to the estate." "Oh, but it does," Ella Ra said, stepping closer to him. "I have been reading the original entailment, father. The one that was filed when Mother and I were still living. You see, the lands do not revert to the ducal line upon my death. They revert to the crown. The king, who is currently investigating your son-in-law for treason, will inherit everything. Everything you have schemed for, everything you have sacrificed me for, will go to him." The color drained from the Duke's face. "That is a lie. The documents were clear, The documents were forged," Ella Ra said flatly. "I know, because I found the original in D.A. Rian's study. He has been using you, father. He has been manipulating you, just as he manipulated me. And when the investigation reveals his treason, everything you have done to protect him will come crashing down on your head." She turned away from him, her heart pounding. She had just played her most dangerous CA road. Her father was a proud and ruthless man, but he was not a fool. He would understand that his survival depended on distancing himself from D.A. Rian, on proving his loyalty to the crown. But she had no time to watch the seeds of doubt take root. She had another task to complete, one that required all her focus. The corridor opened onto a small courtyard, a hidden den surrounded by walls covered in climbing roses. The air was thick with their scent, cloying and sweet. And there, waiting in the shadows, was Lillian. "Ella Ra," Lillian said, her voice a silken thread. "You have been causing quite a stir tonight. That is not like you. Usually you are so quiet, so accommodating." "I have had a change of heart," Ella Ra said, turning to face her sister. "I have decided that being accommodating is vastly overrated." Lillian's smile curdled. "You think you are very clever, Don't you think you can undo everything we have built, everything we have, Rened? I think, Ella Ra said softly, that you have made a grave mistake. You have underestimated me, Lillian. You always have. You saw my kindness as weakness, my trust as foolishness, my love as something to be exploited. But you were wrong. And now, you are going to pay for that mistake. She reached into her sleeve and withdrew the letter opener, the crystal hilt gleaming in the moonlight. Lillian's eyes widened, and she stepped back, her hands raised in a gesture of self-defense. You would not dare, Lillian hissed. If you touch me, Father will have you arrested. Rian will see you hanged. Father has our bigger concerns tonight, Ella Ra said, advancing slowly. And Rian is about to be arrested for treason. You see, sister, your plan has failed. The poison you meant to use on me has been found. The apotheke has confirmed its nature. Within the hour, the king's guardians will be sea-urching Rian's chambers. They will find the letters. They will find the forged documents. And they will find everything you have done to orchestrate my downfall. Lillian's composure shattered. Her face contorted with rage, and she lunged at Ella Ra, her fingers clawing for her throat. But Ella Ra was ready. She sidestepped, catching Lillian's wrist and twisting it hard. The letter opener pressed against her sister's throat, the tip drawing a thin line of blood. Tell me, Ella Ra whispered, her voice deadly calm. Was it worth it, all the scheming, all the lies, all the cruelty? Was it worth the price of my life? Lillian's eyes were wide with terror. She had never seen this side of her sister, the cold steel beneath the soft silk. Please, she whimpered. Please, Ella Ra. I am your sister. I love you. No, you do not, Ella Ra said. You never did. You envied me and you hated me, and you wanted everything I had. And now you have nothing. Nothing but the consequences of your own choices. She released her sister, pushing her away. Lillian stumbled and fell, her beautiful gown streaked with dirt and blood. Ella Ra looked down at her, the woman who had been the architect of her destruction, and felt nothing but a cold, righteous fury. This is not the end, Ella Ra said, turning away. This is only the beginning. You will watch everything you have built crumble to dust. You will lose your husband, your status, your place at court. And when you have nothing left, when you are as broken and disgusted as you tried to make me, then you will understand what true despair feels like. She walked back Tawa RD the Great Hall, her heart racing. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of commotion, the raised voices, the clatter of guardias armado. The investigation had begun. Rian's world was collapsing around him, and she had done it all with nothing but a whisper and a well-timed lie. As she re-entered the hall, she found it in chaos. The king was on his feet, his face red with fury. Aldrich stood at his side, his expression grim and satisfied. In the center of the chaos, Rian was being restrained by two guardias, his face pale with shock. You have committed treason against the crown, the king thundered. Your schemes are relayed, Ba. Your treachery is exposed. Take him to the dungeons. We will decide his fate in the morning. Lara watched as her husband was dragged away, his eyes finding hers in the crowd. There was no love in that gaze, no remorse. Only hatred, burning and bright. She met it without flinching. Let him hate her. Let him rot in the darkness. Knowing that she had been the one to destroy him, the room was spinning around her, the weight of the night pressing down on her shoulders. She had won. She had won. But the battle was far from over. There were still her father's machinations to unravel, Lillian's schemes to dismantle, the entire network of corruption to expose. Aldrich Ape read at her side, his hand pressing against her back. You did well, he murmured. Better than I could have hoped. But you look pale. You need to rest. She nodded, allowing herself to be led from the hall. The noise faded behind her, the laughter and music growing distant as they walked through the silent corridors. She felt a strange emptiness settling over her, a hollow space where her rage had been. But as she looked up at Aldrich, at the genuine concern in his eyes, she felt something else. Something that frightened her far more than her enemies ever had. She felt the first stirrings of something that might, if she let it, grow into trust. She could not afford to trust. Not yet. But for now, she could afford to rest. Tomorrow, she would rise again. The dungeons of the royal palace were a world apart from the gilded splendor above. The air was thick with the stench of damp stone and rust, and the only light came from flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Ella had never descended into this place in her first life. She had been too sheltered, too protected by the lies that had wrapped around her like a shroud. Now she walked its corridors with steady steps, her gown brushing against the grime-covered floor, and she felt nothing but grim satisfaction. Rian's cell was at the end of the row, a small chamber of iron bars and straw-strewn stone. He sat on a low bench, his fine clothes now soiled and torn, his dark hair disheveled. He looked up as she approached, and his eyes narrowed with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. "You," he spat, rising to his feet. "You did this. You betrayed me." Ella stopped a few feet from his cell, her hands clasped loosely before her. "Betrayed you," she repeated, her voice soft and wondering. "That is an interesting choice of words, Rian. Tell me, how does it feel to taste the same poison you fed me?" He lunged at the bars, his fingers curling around the iron, his face contorted with rage. "I should have killed you myself," he reled. "I should have slit your throat the day I realized you were worthless. But I was merciful. I gave you a chance to fade away quietly, to die with some dignity. And this is how you repay me." Merciful, Ella laughed, a cold, sharp sound that echoed through the dungeon. "You locked me in a Sidya RD, and reved me. You took everything I had, everything my mother left me, and you gave it to my sister. You plotted with my father to have me red mad, to erase me from existence. And when that wasn't enough, you came to my room with a syringe of nightshade and watched me die. That is not mercy, Rian. That is cruelty dressed in silk." His face paled, and something flickered in his eyes. Confusion. Recognition. He remembered that night, remembered the poison, remembered the convulsions that had racked her body. But she was standing here, alive and whole, and he did not understand. "How?" he whispered. "How are you still alive? I saw you die. I watched the life leave your eyes. You were dead, Ella. You were dead." "I was," she agreed. "And then I woke up. I woke up, and I remembered everything. Every cruel word, every calculated betrayal, every moment of suffering you and Lillian and my father inflicted on me. And I decided that I would not let it happen again. I would not be your victim, Rian. Not this time." He read at her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Real fear, the kind that came from confronting something beyond understanding. She was a ghost, a revenant, a woman who had clawed her way back from the grave to exact her revenge. And he was trapped in a cage with no way out. "I can give you anything," he said, his voice desperate. "Money. Power. The annulment can be undone. I will leave Lillian, I swear it. I will make you my true wife, the only wife. Just get me out of here, Ella. Please." She eyed him with cold, flat eyes. He was pathetic, reduced to begging, every shred of dignity stripped away. She felt nothing for him, not even contempt. He was beneath her now, a broken insect writhing under her heel. "You cannot offer me anything I want," she said quietly. "I have already taken everything you had. Your fortune, your reputation, your freedom. Soon, I will have your life. The king has decided that treason is punishable by death. The execution is scheduled for dawn." His face went white. "No. No, you cannot let them do this. I am your husband. I am your lord. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," Ella cut him off. "You owed me loyalty, and you gave me betrayal. You owed me love, and you gave me cruelty. You owed me protection, and you gave me death. You are not my husband, Rian. You are my murderer, and I have come to watch you die." She turned away from his cell, his cries echoing behind her as she walked back Tawa Rd the stairs. She had seen what she needed to see. He was broken, terrified, powerless. It was a small justice, a taste of what was to come, but it was not enough. It would never be enough. The upper levels of the palace were quiet in the early hours of the morning, the servants already beginning their preparations for the day. Ella Ra moved through the corridors like a ghost, her thoughts churning. Da Rian would be dead by sunrise, his conspiracy in tatters, his network dismantled. But there were others who still needed to face their judgment. Her father, the Duke of Ashworth, had barricaded himself in his chambers, refusing to see anyone. He had sent a message to the king, protesting his innocence, offering to testify against Da Rian in exchange for leniency. It was a desperate gambit, and Ella Ra knew it would fail. The king had no use for a man who had conspired to hide treason in his own household. The duke's title and lands were already being stripped, par sealed out to the crown's loyal supporters. Lillian had vanished. After the scene in the Courtier RD, after Ella Ra had pressed the letter opener to her throat, her sister had fled. There were rumors that she had been seen boa riding a Cia Riage in the dead of night, heading Tawa Rd the coast. She was running, as she always did, leaving destruction in her wake. But Ella Ra knew that Lillian's flight was not an escape. It was a delay. She would be found, and when she was, she would answer for her crimes. But the victory felt hollow. As Ella Ra walked through the silent palace, she found herself haunted by the memory of Da Rian's face, the desperation in his eyes. She had wanted him to suffer, had dreamed of this moment for what felt like an eternity. But now that it was here, she felt only emptiness, a cold void where her rage had been. She paused by a window. STA ring out at the GA dens below. The first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The roses in the GA den were in full bloom, their petals heavy with dew. They looked beautiful, innocent, but she knew the truth of them. Beneath the petals were thorns, and beneath the thorns was death. "You look troubled," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Aldrich standing in the doorway, his d'Arque cloak dusted with the morning mist. He had been up all night, she realized. The lines around his eyes were deeper, the shadows beneath them more pronounced. But his gaze was steady, and there was something in it that made her heart beat a little faster. "Should I not be?" she asked, turning back to the window. "I have just condemned my husband to death. I have destroyed my family. I have become everything they accuse me of being. A monster. A traitor. A woman driven by madness and vengeance." Aldrich walked to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing against hers. "You are not a monster," he said quietly. "You are a survivor. There is a difference." "Is there?" she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I feel nothing, Aldrich. I watched Da Rian beg for his life, and I felt nothing. I have set my father's ruin in motion, and I feel nothing. Lillian is out there somewhere, running for her life, and I feel nothing. What does that make me?" "It makes you human," he said. "You have been through more than anyone should ever have to endure. You have seen the worst that people can do to each other, and you have survived. That does not make you a monster. It makes you strong." She turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time. He was close, closer than she had realized. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, the faint lines at their corners. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You came for me," she said, her voice rely above a whisper. "In the GA den, you came for me. Why, you did not know me. You had no reason to trust me. Why did you take that risk?" Aldrich was silent for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. "Because I saw you," he said finally. "I saw you at court, surrounded by vultures, and I saw that you were not like them. You were kind, genuine, trusting. And they were ring you apart. I could not stand by and let that happen. You did not know that I would be useful to you," she pressed. "You did not know that I could help you bring Da Rian down. You took a risk on a woman you rely knew, a woman everyone said was mad."
"Why?"
He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized she was shedding. "Because I saw you, Ella R.A., he repeated. "Not the Duchess, not the victim, not the schemer. I saw you. And I knew that if you ever had the chance, you would burn the world to save yourself. I wanted to be there when that fire caught." She read at him, her heart racing, a strange RMTH spreading through her chest. She had not expected this, had not allowed herself to hope for anything beyond survival. But there was something in his eyes, something that felt like possibility, something that felt like the beginning of trust. "You rely know me," she said, her voice trembling. "I know enough," he replied. "I know that you are brave. I know that you are clever. I know that you have been hurt more than anyone should ever be hurt, and that you have not let it break you. I know that you are fierce, and that you are loyal, and that you would do anything to protect the people you love. And I know that I would be honored to stand at your side, to help you rebuild everything they took from you." She felt the tears spill down her cheeks, hot and sudden. She had not cried in so long, had forgotten that she still could. The grief she had held at bay for so long came rushing out, a tide of pain and loss and desperate hope. "I do not know how to trust," she admitted. "I do not know if I can ever trust anyone again." "Then do not trust me," Aldrich said gently. "Not yet. Just let me be here. Let me prove myself. Day by day, moment by moment. I will not ask for more than you are ready to give." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing, and for the first time in what felt like years, she allowed herself to feel safe. It was a fragile thing, that safety, a gossamer thread that could break at any moment. But it was there, and it was real, and it was enough. The dawn light grew stronger, spilling through the window like liquid gold. In the distance, the bells began to toll, marking the hour of Da Rian's execution. She felt a strange sense of closure, a door closing on the past, a chapter ending. "Come," Aldrich said, taking her hand. "You should not be alone for this." She let him lead her away from the window, her fingers intertwined with his. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with dangers she could not yet see. But for the first time, she did not feel the weight of it crushing her. She had someone to carry the burden, someone who saw her as something more than a weapon to be used. And as they walked together into the morning light, Ella R.A. allowed herself to dream of a future she had never dared to imagine. But the dream was fragile, and darkness was still gathering on the horizon. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at the palace, sealed with a broken crest that Ella R.A. recognized with a jolt of cold dread. It was from her father, written in a trembling hand that spoke of desperation and despair. "My daughter," the letter began, "I am dying. The stress of our sepe ration has broken me. My physicians say I have only weeks to live. I beg you, come to me before it is too late. There are things I must tell you, secrets that I have ride for too long. About your mother, about the day she died, about the truth of what happened to her." The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor. Her mother had died when she was young, a sudden illness that had been explained away as a fever. But there had always been questions, whispered doubts that she had never dared to voice. Her father had been distant, had Rema ride quickly, had never spoken of her mother with anything but cold formality. Lara picked up the letter, her hands trembling. She knew it could be a trap, another scheme to lure her back into their web. But the mention of her mother, the promise of truth, was a lure she could not resist. She had to go. She had to know, and as she packed her belongings, a new fire kindled in her heart. The hunt was not over. The game was far from finished. There were still secrets to uncover, still betrayals to unravel, and she would not rest until every last one of them was exposed. The Ashworth estate rose from the mist like a specter of forgotten days, its gray stone walls softened by centuries of ivy, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Ella R.A. stood at the edge of the drive, her hand resting on the pommel of her horse, and felt the weight of memory pressing down on her shoulders. She had not set foot on this land since her mother's funeral, since the day she had been packed off to the capital to begin her new life as D.A. Rian's bride. She had been a girl then, frightened and grieving, with no one to turn to and no one to guide her. Now she returned as a woman forged in fire, her heart hardened but not closed, her eyes open to truths she had once been too naive to see. Aldrich rode beside her, his presence a steady anchor in the churning sea of her emotions. He had insisted on accompanying her, had refused to let her face this journey alone. "If it is a trap, I will spring it with you," he had said. "If it is the truth, I will help you bear it." She had not argued. She had not wanted to. The great oak doors of the manor swung open as they approached, and a servant she did not recognize ushered them inside. The hall was the same as she remembered, the same faded tapestries, the same cold stone floors, the same portraits of stern ancestors ring down from the walls. But it felt smaller now, shabbier, the grandeur of her childhood stripped away to reveal the decay beneath. Her father was in the library, propped up in a great leather chair by the fire. He looked like a ghost, his skin sallow and stretched thin over his bones, his eyes sunken and clouded with pain. A blanket was draped over his legs, and his hands trembled where they rested on the armrests. "Ella Are," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "You came." She stood in the doorway, her hands clasped before her. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind, had imagined demanding answers, screaming accusations, watching him squirm under the weight of his guilt. But now that he was here, broken and dying, she felt only a profound weariness. "I came for the truth, Father," she said quietly. "Not for you. For my mother." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I thought you might. I have ride this secret for too long. It has poisoned everything. Every decision I made, every choice I forced upon you. It was all born from guilt, from fear. Aldrich stepped forward, his hand resting on Ella Ross's shoulder. "We are re-listening." The Duke of Ashworth looked up at the prince, something like resignation in his eyes. "Your Highness, I did not expect you to accompany my daughter, but I suppose it is fitting. You deserve to know the truth as well. It concerns the crown as much as it concerns this family." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. The Duke took a long, shuddering breath and began to speak. "Your mother was not ill, Ella Are. She was poisoned. I did it. I gave her a slow-acting draught, a mixture of herbs that mimic the symptoms of a wasting fever. She died over the course of 3 months, and by the end, she was grateful for the release. She never knew what I had done. She thought she was simply dying, as so many women do." Lara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She had expected something terrible, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. Her father, the man who had been the center of her childhood world, had murdered her mother. Coldly, deliberately, over months of agony. "Why?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Why would you do that? She loved you. She devoted her life to you." "I loved her too," the Duke said, his voice thick with treacherous. "I loved her more than I have ever loved anyone. But I was weak, and she knew something that could have destroyed me. She found the letters, Ella Ra. The letters I had exchanged with the northern rebels. She discovered that I had been funding their cause, that I had been working against the crown. She confronted me. She demanded that I stop, that I confess my treason and beg for the king's mercy." Ella Rasta read at him, her mind reeling. The northern rebels. The same conspiracy Da Rian had been entangled in. It had sta root with her father, had been passed down to her husband like a poisoned inheritance. "She gave me a choice," the Duke continued, his voice rely above a whisper. "She said she would keep my secret if I would end my involvement. But I knew she would never truly forgive me. I knew it would hang over our marriage forever, a shadow that would never fade. And I was too proud, too frightened, to face the consequences of my actions. So I chose to silence her. I convinced myself it was mercy, that it was better for her to die believing I loved her than to live knowing what I had become." Ella Ra's knees buckled, and Aldrich caught her, steadying her with his arm round her waist. She felt the cold fury rising in her chest, a tide of anger so vast it threatened to consume her. "You killed her," she said, her voice flat and cold. "You killed her to protect yourself. And then you ride Lillian's mother. You filled this house with a woman who taught her daughter to hate me, who helped orchestrate my destruction. You destroyed everything my mother built, everything she loved." The Duke nodded, tears streaming down his gaunt cheeks. "I know. I have known it for years, and I have hated myself for it. But I was too much of a coward to confess. I told myself that you would be happier not knowing the truth, that it was better to let you believe she had died peacefully, that her suffering had been natural. But it was a lie. It was all lies." Ella turned away from him, her hands shaking. The rage was still there, burning hot and bright, but beneath it was something else. Grief. Profound, crushing grief for the mother she had lost, for the childhood that had been stolen from her. She had been robbed of so much, not just by Reborn and Lillian, but by the man who was supposed to protect her. Aldrich stepped forward, his voice calm and measured. "Your confession has been heard, Your Grace. It will be recorded and presented to the king. The crimes you have admitted to are severe. Treason. Murder. It is not within my power to offer mercy." The Duke nodded, a strange peace settling over his face. "I know. I do not ask for mercy. I have lived with this guilt for too long. I am ready to face the judgment." Ella turned back to him, her eyes blazing. "You will not escape so easily," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Death is too kind for you. You will live, father. You will live long enough to see the truth of your crimes exposed, your name dishonored, your legacy destroyed. You will watch everything you built crumble to dust, and you will know that it was your own actions that brought it all down." The Duke read at her, his eyes wide with a fear she had never seen in him before. He had expected her to beg for mercy, perhaps, or to weep at his bedside. He had not expected her to be so cold, so implacable. "You are your mother's daughter," he whispered. She was the same, fierce and unyielding. "I should have remembered that." "Yes," Ella said, her voice softening just slightly. "You should have. But you chose to see only what you wanted to see. That was your greatest mistake." She turned and walked out of the library, her step steady, her head held high. Aldrich followed her into the corridor, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice full of concern. She stopped, taking a long, shuddering breath. The TRS were threatening again, but she held them back. She had cried enough. She had let them see her broken, desperate, afraid. But no more. From this moment on, she would be the one in control. "I will be," she said, meeting his eyes. "It will take time, but I will be." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close against his chest. She felt the steady rhythm of his heart, the rhythm of his body, and for the first time since her mother had died, she felt like she was home. "I will not leave you," he murmured into her hair. "Not ever. You are not alone in this." She closed her eyes, letting herself believe it. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and official decrees. The Duke of Ashworth was stripped of his title and lands, his name expunged from the rolls of the nobility. He was confined to a small estate on the edge of the kingdom, under constant guard, his every move watched and recorded. It was not the justice she had imagined, but it was enough. He would live with the weight of his confession, with the knowledge that his own daughter had condemned him. Reborn was executed at dawn, as scheduled. Ella did not attend. She had already seen what she needed to see, had already found the closure she needed. His death was not a victory. It was simply the end of a chapter. Lillian was found in a small fishing village on the coast, living in a hovel, her fine clothes sold for food. She was brought back to the capital in chains, her golden hair matted, her eyes hollow with despair. She was tried for conspiracy and sentenced to life in a convent, a fate that Ella felt was too merciful but accepted nonetheless. And Ella herself stood at the edge of the palace Gardens, the roses blooming around her in a riot of crimson and gold. The scent was sweet, cloying, but it no longer made her stomach turn. It was just a scent now, a memory of pain that had been transformed into something else. Aldrich came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I am thinking about beginnings," she said. "The roses used to remind me of death. Now they remind me of renewal. They bloom from the earth, from the ashes of what came before. And they are beautiful." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Then let us bloom together," he said. "Let us build something new from the wreckage of the past." She looked up at him, at the man who had seen her at her worst and had chosen to stay. She thought of her mother, of the words she had whispered so long ago. "Always be wary of the sweetest rose," she had said. "Its thorns are often the deadliest." Lara had learned that lesson the hard way. But she had also learned that even the deadliest thorns could be pruned, that even the most beautiful rose could be grown anew. She had been pruned, cut back to the root, but she had grown again. Stronger, fiercer, more beautiful. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out the letter opener, the one with the crystal hilt that had belonged to her mother. She held it up to the sunlight, watching the light dance in its depths. It had been a weapon once, a tool of defense. Now it was a symbol, a reminder of where she had come from and of how far she had yet to go. "Come," she said, tucking the letter opener back into her sleeve. "Let us walk. I have a feeling the best is yet to come." Aldrich smiled, his eyes bright with the promise of the future. "Of that I have no doubt." And together, they walked into the Rose Garden, the morning sun casting long, golden shadows before them. The thorns were still there, hidden beneath the petals, waiting to prick the ennuyé. But Lara was no longer ennuyé. She had learned to see the thorns, to avoid them, to use them if necessary. She was no longer the victim. She was no longer the prey. She was Lara Voss, the Duchess of Thornwood, and she had risen from the ashes of her own destruction. She had been broken, but she had not been defeated. She had been burned, but she had not been destroyed. She had become the rose that grew from ash, and she would bloom forever.